Okay, so I'm going to get started. So this webinar is called the C-Suite Cipher, How to Crack the Code to Retreats That Leaders Actually Care About. So to kick us off, what I'd love for you all to do is you can go in the chat section, just let us know where you are, what city you're based in, as well as what aspect of planning a retreat is exciting or daunting for you. When you think about planning a retreat, what gets you excited? And then I'd like for you to just put that in the chat. So I'm the founder and CEO of Simetras Team Experiences. We basically specialize in helping leaders design transformative retreats and unlock team potential. So I felt it was a great opportunity to share about Miami as well as the growing corporate retreat scene in Miami and also Fort Lauderdale. So I know firsthand how challenging it can be when it comes to programming, keeping costs down, as well as making sure that there's buy-in for the retreat and it makes sense for the organization. And so we're going to be focused today on how to have those conversations, right? Because I know Stacey, your team already does retreats, but for other folks, it could be something that they're trying to get their team on board with. So we're going to do a little bit of that. So you will get some ideas of how to use your local environment as inspiration. But at the same time, part of this conversation is how to even get leaders to think about the value of retreat and also to make the investment for retreats. Okay, so I'm going to share a proven framework on how to pitch retreats that will resonate with leaders, as well as making sure that you are able to get the people who are, whether they're naysayers and non-believers, on board with this work. A little bit about me. I think it's really important for you to understand the power of retreats and how I even think about retreats and why I'm doing the work that I'm doing with Simetras. 10 years ago, I was living in New York City and I was working my butt off as a consultant. I was traveling all over the world. Career took center stage. It was my entire identity. One day I got a medical diagnosis and the doctor told me, you need to slow down or your work is going to take you out. I completely ignored him and I was like, he's completely exaggerating. And I just kept going at the same speed. And then in a 1 week period, a few months later, I literally had 3 near-death experiences in 1 week. And I almost crashed into an exit barrier as I was pulling out of the highway and my boss was calling me and I was trying to get the phone and it fell in the front seat and I was trying to get it from the front of the seat. And as I was trying to, almost drove into an exit barrier. I remember pulled off the side of the road, stopped the car, I was shaken. And then I realized I couldn't keep going the way that I was going, that I had to just stop. And so I made a decision that changed my life. And the following week, I resigned from my consulting job. I was at one of the big 4 consulting firms. I resigned and a week later, I booked a retreat in upstate New York and I was there for a week. And it was a huge shift for me that made me think very differently about work. And for the first time in my life, I was forced to slow down. I remember I slept in, I walked the trails by my cottage every single day because I just needed to just stop and just bring down my nervous system. And it was after that moment, I decided that I wanted retreats to be a part of my life. And then I made sure that going forward, every year I go on a retreat, so much so that I've built an entire business around organizing retreats and also team offsites so that organizations can do it in a much more intentional way. People can have fun, but at the same time, balancing it with learning, with growth, connection, and also business, making the business imperative and the business case for doing retreats. So all that's to say is that retreats are something that I fell into it because of necessity. And it also changed my life when I actually started doing these retreats. And so a lot of the work that we do in Miami, because Miami is a very warm place, right? So it's a great place to especially during the winter time, to host these type of events. And so what I'm going to do, we're going to do today is I want to share a framework. And I think this can apply to anyone, whether you're already doing retreats. And let's say you want your team to think a little bit differently, maybe in the case of Stacey, like, you know what, we may want to do something slightly different or expand our agenda or programming beyond what we normally do. And so we're going to focus on 3 frameworks that I think can be useful to you. The first one is around inspiring moments. and how to open up the conversation for people to expand their thinking about retreats. And then we're going to look at the magnetic agenda, which is a framework on how you can use retreats as a way to strengthen and deepen relationships. And then lastly, we're going to also look at how to do team building in a way so that it's not lame. I don't know how else to say that, so that it's not lame, it's not corny, but it's actually something that people enjoy. And again, it connects back to a bigger program and also connects back to the business as well, right? And then it becomes worthwhile for everyone. I have a question for all of you. And since we're a small group, I think everyone can feel free to unmute your mic and share. What makes an experience or a moment inspiring for you? I want you to take a few seconds and really think about a moment that maybe you had recently, or maybe it was months or years ago, but it was very inspiring and it left an impression for you. Take a few seconds and think about that. And you can either drop it in the chat, or if there's one or two brave souls who'd love to share, I'd love to hear some other voices other than my own.
I usually find that it's the connection that you have. And after, especially coming out of the pandemic, I work remote as well, running my company. And so to be able to have that in-person connection and those little moments that you have with people, I think are priceless, and the things that you look back on.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. Those unscripted moments, right? Unexpected moments. Anyone else? What other things come to mind?
I agree with Caroline. We do, like I said, we're completely remote. So those unscripted moments, those random lunches, or those snacks where you're just kind of socializing with each other and connecting, because yes, COVID's over, but we're still completely remote. So for us, we struggle with that ability to have those connections. So that's really important to us and to me when I'm planning these things.
Great. I love that. So connections came up twice. Any other things come to mind for folks? I think other things in addition to connection. The connection is like in the engagement are at the center of it, for sure. And then we have the venue, the type of environment that you're in, right? That will determine the type of retreat that you are actually hosting. We also have the programming, the type of sessions that you have, how you structure these connections, right? Like sometimes I've been to so many different types of retreats. And what I've learned is what makes sense for one organization may actually not make sense for another. And what can work for a small group may not work for a larger group. So being really mindful of depending on your team, what they find is inspiring and what can create a catalyst, also an opportunity to open up more space so that there is greater connection, and then there's also greater learning with the retreats. I have another question, follow-up question. What have you observed? So for those of you, whether you already are doing retreats or you're thinking about it, what have you observed from your team or your clients, if you are looking to do retreats with your clients, that has you considering planning a team retreat? So what have you observed that makes you think that retreats are potentially a good solution, or they make sense for your team? I'm going to check the chat and see if we'll have. Danielle said, having a genuine connection with people you value around you. Exactly. That's a great one. When you think about retreats, what about it makes sense for whatever it is that you're solving for? Any thoughts there?
It's the ability to just be face to face and to be with our leaders. Yeah. All that our leaders are still really involved with what we do. So those abilities to have those one-on-ones, those small group sessions, that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're trying to create every time we do our retreats.
The connections, that's right. Getting people together because you don't see each other much.
Yep.
Right. So you're making up for the fact that people are not in person all the time. So that is the problem that your team is solving for, the hybrid remote environment. Anyone else? All right. So what I think is really stands out in the connection piece is a cornerstone of why retreats are so beneficial. And so how, when you're thinking about creating space and also thinking about, for a lot of people, connection is one, but for some others, it could be for the first time. It's a way for them to just get a little bit of respite, right? Like they don't have a lot of time outside of work and home to take a bit of a break, right? So retreats can be a great opportunity for that. And so, so there are certain core needs that I think, like deep rest can also be addressed during retreats, as well as meaningful connection, which has come up a lot, having a renewed sense of purpose and value, making sure that the daily grind doesn't obscure the why of your work. Why are we here? Why are we doing this work? Retreats help to address that, as well as people being able to learn that it's okay to have boundaries, and the always on culture is not always beneficial. So modeling, being able to take time away, to step back, to have fun, to connect, to engage, retreats are a great way to do that. And then lastly, just opportunity for restoration as well, right? So balancing, we have a lot of things to do with also, this is time for us to also chill and relax, okay? All right. Any questions before I move forward? So the next framework is the magnetic agenda. The magnetic agenda is an opportunity to think about how to use, help strengthen professional relationships, the connection piece, by also framing the reason to gather, both with the context of empathy and business opportunity. So it's being able to bring those two things together, that the people can understand that your organization cares about you, wants you to make space. We need to make space to connect with each other. We need to build relationships. We also sometimes need to address that sometimes there's burnout, and retreats is a great way to actually address that. Sometimes that's what you're solving for, is that there's actually burnout in the organization, in addition to the need to connect. And then also being able to hold these two things together when you're talking to leadership teams about the empathy that you are able to show to the organization, that we're doing this because we care and want to make space for it, as well as it's a great strategic reset. It's an opportunity to basically, for the business to come back, realign teams, and accelerate effectiveness. And it's a great perk to be able to do these two things together. And so the magnetic agenda is really about how do you engage and talk about retreats in a way that gets at the empathetic piece and also the strategic reason for connecting. And then the last framework is around the truth about team building. So question here, raise your hand or just give me some sort of an emoji, give me some sort of a reaction if you love team building activities. Yeah, I'm seeing a head shake, Stacy's like, I'm not anyone else? Carolyn, Gina, Daniel, like, what are your thoughts? Yay, nay, you can put it in the chat. You can send me, just put out an emoji. What are your thoughts around team building? So, for me, team building activities, they are a mixed bag, right? So sometimes, it kind of like that, not my favorite. Yeah, because sometimes they can be corny and a bit lame, right? Like, who wants to do yet another trust fall? Like, nobody. And so we think that a way to get around team building not being so not cool is to think about how do you frame it through the lens of growth, and also as a learning opportunity, and also as an opportunity to connect. So when you bring those three things together, what you end up having is you create experiences that you can connect again back to the business, back to critical needs that, especially for the people, the naysayers who are like, why are we doing this? This is pointless. This allows them to have some of their needs met as well, right? Then they understand, okay, we're having fun, but hey, there's still there's other opportunities here. So my suggestion is, rather than just doing just random team building activities, think about, okay, is there a leadership development component that we can add, or a strategic planning integration component, or team culture alignment sessions that we could do, or stress management workshops, or design sprints. Like if it's a company that you all work in a way that's agile and you want to integrate, like doing something within the retreat that allows you to still be able to flex your skills and your muscles around that, you can do that as well. And then lastly, or as well as strengthening adaptability and agility, right? So you can take different components of things that are connected to growth, to connection, and to learning, and you can integrate them into your retreat. So that's what we're going to talk about next. I'm going to quickly walk you through 3 different types of retreats that we can host right here in Miami. right, that would allow you to see the difference in how you could create programming within the local context that's not going to blow your budget. Okay. All right. Well, the first one is for companies that are more traditionalist and maybe like they love things that have to do with heritage and culture. Using local inspiration to guide planning, I think, is one of the great ways. So depending on the town that you're in, right, what can you take away from your environment to give people an opportunity to be inspired by their new environment? So for a sample agenda for Little Havana, for example, and just so you know, Little Havana is really like literally like Little Cuba, Little Havana in Miami, it's a whole neighborhood. And it's as if you're in Cuba. And so, so this is more of a culture-based experience. And so, for example, if you had like 3 days, right, people fly in the night before, during the first day, I always think it's great to chunk up the blocks in threes, morning, afternoon, and evening, so that you're able to section off areas and people know, depending on the particular time of the day, this is the time is being allocated for. So in the morning, you could do anything that has to do with movement, so bike riding, yoga, or swimming. While in the afternoon, you could do a leadership development workshop, and you could do it at a co-working space, and then just rent a big conference room or multiple conference rooms at a co-working space, which is not as expensive as doing it at a hotel, actually. And then in the evening, you could do a team kickoff dinner, and you could do it at a local restaurant in Little Havana. Day 2, you could focus on, for example, a strategic planning integration workshop where you spend about 3 to 4 hours, again, out of the same co-working space. And in the afternoon, you do a walking tour of Little Havana. So these types of activities are optional, they're fun. And then you could do a Cuban dinner and salsa dancing at a venue like Ball and Chain in the evening, for example. Or another thing too, if there is, I believe there was like a Grand Prix car racing here last year. You could also think about like big events that are happening if your team's really into that. And also because there's a lot of big events that happen all over South Florida. And then you could also, like Art Basel is a huge one that happens in November. So for more like creative teams, it's a great time to come, although you're competing with like just hotel prices are higher. So just be mindful of that. And so you could also build around that too. And so you could add a stress management workshop at the end, and then have a team capstone lunch, and then people travel home. So that is essentially one agenda. Let me share another one. Another agenda would be if you were to go to Wynwood. Wynwood is like the Soho of Miami. It's basically, Soho's in New York, and also in London, but it's very creative. All the artists are there, lots of galleries, lots of new shops, very creative environment. And so this is a place where for teams that are much more, for creative teams, you could, again, think about, okay, day 1, do something in the area for inspiration. So like a Wynwood walking tour, and then a team workshop at a co-working space. There are several in Wynwood that's all walking distance, and a curated team kickoff dinner at a vibrant local outdoor venue in Wynwood. While in day 2, you could, again, in the morning, you could actually focus on doing a team workshop first at a co-working space, and then you could do something like a scavenger hunt in Wynwood. Wynwood is a great place for that because there's so many nooks and crannies and a lot of really cool venues and murals. And then you could do a dinner, whether it's in Wynwood or Little Havana or Miami Beach. These are all like literally 10, 15-minute Uber ride away, very accessible. And on a day 3, you could do a team workshop, again, at a co-working space in the morning, have a Caribbean or Latin cooking class lunch in the afternoon, and folks travel home. So this is a 2.5-day agenda where people come in the day before and then they leave on the 3rd day. So that is basically the 3rd one. And then also, of course, I almost skipped Miami Beach. Like, how do I do that? Miami Beach is so iconic. And a 3rd option for nature-loving teams would be to just do it on the beach. Do your whole retreat around a beach theme. And so you could do in the morning, bike riding, beach yoga, beach volleyball competition, swimming, whatever like beach activity people are into that could be set up. And then you have in the afternoon a team culture alignment workshop at a co-working space in Miami Beach. Again, there's several there. And then a team kickoff dinner resort on the beach, right? You have the entire dinner on the beach. And then day 2, you could mix and match and do something like sprint problem solving or design workshop. kayaking or paddleboarding team outing in the afternoon, and then a sunset dinner on a chartered yacht, if that's something that would interest your team. And then on day 3, again, you do co-working space design workshop, team capstone lunch, Miami Beach restaurant, and people travel home in the evening. So what I've done is you can mix and match and have different types of learning sessions. But as you can see, that's really only like 1/4 or 1/3 of your day. But you can still sneak in some interesting programming, but at the same time, still have fun, got time to go to the beach, do things like kayaking, to have to do like a yacht, a chartered yacht, or whatever it is the team is looking for. I know the yacht, Stacey, is not in everybody's budget, but some teams, they have that kind of budget. And so these are just examples of different locations in Miami that you could do you can use the city in the different neighborhoods as a guide for inspiration. And Miami's one place, but there's also Fort Lauderdale, which is really the Venice of the United States, with all the canals and stuff. So a lot of access to waterways there, where you can also think about how do I use the city to build my retreat? And that's something you can do no matter where you are. That's a tip, to just use your local environment to help determine what kind of event you're going to have. So I know we are almost pressed for time, and I want to leave room for I was going to show this video, but I don't think we have time for it, but I'm happy to share that with you another time. But this is a retreat that we did last year. This was actually in Seattle. It was not here in Miami, but it was done in Seattle. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is info@simetras.co. I will drop it in the chat. I also think that if you want any more resources, I have a retreat planning guide that I'm happy to share with you, that you can just download, and it will help you to think through all of the component pieces of retreat. Because all we were able to cover today is how do you just convince a team or a leadership team or your manager how to at least start to have that conversation around retreat. We didn't talk about using data to help inform that conversation, right? Because those conversations would come later in terms of being able to show the level of data you collect that shows that a retreat actually makes sense for your company, or even going into the planning, the registration, the booking, the coordination. That's a lot more that's involved, but this is just a way to get you to think about how do you even set the stage to have that conversation, so that you are approaching it in a way to get folks to think about, okay, when was the last time I was inspired, and how does that work into how I approach how our team thinks about how we work, rather than going into well, this is all the data, and the idea is to set the stage for the conversation, and then the next time you meet with your leadership team, to be able to actually share, okay, this is why I think a retreat makes sense, or this type of retreat would work for our company. This is the data proving that we need to think about this differently. I feel like I just gave you some nuggets that you can walk away with. You can feel free to reach out to me at info@simetras.co.